By the height of the empire in the 2nd century AD, Rome's urban population approached 1 million inhabitants, a number far exceeding the city's own agricultural capacity. To prevent famine and quell potential unrest, emperors established the cura annoni, a state-run logistics and welfare program that procured, transported, stored, and ultimately distributed grain, and later bread, free or heavily subsidized to eligible citizens. This spectacle of public provisioning, paired with mass entertainments, became the hallmark of imperial benevolence, immortalized by Juvenal's phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. So how did the Romans do it? How did they get enough bread to feed all of those people? How does one even go about feeding 1 million people? Let's find out. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how the Roman Empire fed Rome. If you like videos like this, please make sure to subscribe and leave your suggestions for topics down below. I always love hearing what you have to say. And if you want to support the channel, check the description below for ways you can help me make this content better. Provincial production Rome itself could produce only a fraction of the grain needed. Instead, the fertile provinces of Roman Egypt, North Africa and Sicily supplied the bulk of the wheat, primarily durum, that fed the capital's masses. Following Augustus's annexation of Egypt in 30 BC, it became the empire's principal granary, while North Africa and Sicily supplemented through massive estates and state-supported farms. By the 70s AD, the historian Josephus claimed North Africa alone fed Rome for 8 months of the year and Egypt for the remaining 4. Estimates of annual grain requirements vary among scholars. G.E. Rickman calculates about 40 million modii, almost equals 272,000 tons, per year. J. Erdkamp suggests a minimum of 150,000 tons, assuming 200 kg per person for a population of 750,000 to 1 million, while Mattingly and Aldrete estimate 237,000 tons to provide 2,326 calories/day per capita for 1 million inhabitants. The grain harvest in Roman Egypt was so bountiful that Augustus even diverted some of it to Rome's aqueducts, famously quipping, "I found fields producing only grain. I left them producing grain and wine." However, the burden fell heavily on the peasantry. Tax collectors pressed them mercilessly to meet their quotas, and peasants often toiled under the lash, herding animals or hauling grain to local depots. If their yield fell short, they faced penalties ranging from fines to forced labor to confiscation of property. But it wasn't just Egypt. Across the empire, the efficient exploitation of slave labor on large estates, known as latifundia, ensured abundant harvests. In North Africa, where wheat, barley, legumes and olives thrived, slaves cultivated sprawling fields using iron plows pulled by teams of oxen. Maritime logistics, transporting such vast quantities of grain, required an extensive maritime apparatus. Privately owned merchant ships, often subsidized by the state, carried cargoes of 10,000 modii, almost equals 70 tons, or more from Alexandria and Carthage. Most grain shipments originated in Egypt, where the ruler Ptolemy XII had refitted and expanded the fleet inherited from Cleopatra. Some vessels sailed directly to Rome, though many more touched at intermediary ports. A typical route steered ships northeast to Cyprus, hugged the southern coast of Asia Minor and Crete, then swung west past Malta toward Puteoli and after Claudius's harbor improvements, directly to Portus, Rome's purpose-built harbor. From Puteoli, grain was lightered onto barges to Ostia. Smaller vessels could proceed straight to Ostia for unloading. Storage and administration once ashore, grain was transferred to vast Heraea, state granaries, overseen by the Praefectus Annoni. Originally designed by Agrippa in the reign of Augustus, these warehouses stood near the Tiber River at Ostia and Portus, and Trajan later expanded them. Their function was to store grain destined for Rome, rotating stock from the newest, highest quality shipments in the rear to the front, which had the first dibs on any new arrivals. From there, stocks were forwarded through Rome's internal distribution network. By the 4th century AD, the city maintained 290 granaries and 254 bakeries, all regulated by the state to ensure quality control and prevent pilferage. Milling and baking. Although some grain was taken home, most dole recipients had it processed in local mill bakery complexes. Small hand querns and rotary hopper mills sufficed for domestic use, but by the 1st century BC, water-driven mills powered by aqueducts and animal-driven kneading machines became widespread. Turnovers and output varied, but a water-powered mill might process 150 to 200 kilograms per day. By the late Republic, professional baker guilds had formed, operating large beehive ovens that baked loaves in minutes. The flour and fuel costs associated with this system strained household budgets, especially during shortages, and the shift to bread distribution alleviated this pressure somewhat. During the Antonine Plague, Marcus Aurelius considered making the dole a permanent institution. But the outbreak of war with the Germanic tribes compelled him to suspend the practice in favor of military spending. However, a famine in 190 AD prompted Septimius Severus to replace the grain dole with bread rations, converting the existing granaries into flour mills, which were centralized on the Janiculum Hill in the late 3rd century. Under Aurelian, the dole evolved into freshly baked bread, with recipients paying a nominal fee for milling and baking. In times of plenty, bakers delivered the bread to designated taverns or bathhouses, whose attendants distributed it to the recipients. But when production lagged, recipients were expected to collect their rations personally. Each loaf yielded 2 portions, one for consumption that day and one for the next. Severus Alexander also mandated supplementary distributions of olive oil and wine to children and pregnant or nursing women, augmented by pork under Maximinus Thrax. Distribution to citizens. The formal grain dole began with Gaius Gracchus's Lex Licinia in 123 BC, allowing eligible male citizens to purchase 33 kilograms of grain per month at a subsidized rate of 5 modii. 2 decades later, under the power of Clodius Pulcher, the number of recipients ballooned. He set the price at 1 modius per person, effectively free distribution. Julius Caesar trimmed the rolls to 150,000 and Augustus stabilized it at 200,000, numbers that persisted throughout the early empire. Throughout the early empire, the grain dole consumed 15 to 33% of Rome's imported grain. Political and social impact. The cost of financing the annona is debated, but it never exceeded 15% of state revenues. Nevertheless, the grain dole represented a huge financial commitment, underscoring the centrality of Rome as an imperial priority. Its impact on political stability cannot be overstated. By guaranteeing a steady supply of food for the urban poor, the grain dole placated a potentially volatile populace, encouraging loyalty to the emperors. Moreover, the carefully calibrated distribution of free grain kept prices high enough to protect farmers' interests while providing relief to the impoverished masses. It was a delicate balancing act that contributed significantly to the empire's stability. Furthermore, the system served as a powerful tool of clientelism, forging a bond between rulers and the ruled through tangible benefits. Rulers could manipulate the rolls to reward political allies or punish rivals, creating a network of dependence and obligation. The grain dole wasn't just about food distribution, it was about securing power, solidifying control, and maintaining the fragile fabric of Roman society. Conclusion. Through a sophisticated blend of provincial agriculture, maritime logistics, state-run storage, regulated milling, and baking, and carefully targeted social policy, Rome sustained a perpetual flow of grain, and later bread, to its teeming populace. This system not only fed a million-strong city but also became a cornerstone of imperial authority, demonstrating the administrative might that lay at the heart of Rome's enduring power. So, yeah, it turns out the secret to feeding a million people is buying their loyalty and making sure they do and cause trouble. That seems pretty easy. Why can't we do that today?